Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. That titled Doluor's face was also covered in ash from the explosion. Although his limbs weren't blown off, the shirt he was wearing was in tatters now. He spat out blood in the air, and his blood quickly turned into ice before falling to the ground. Both he and that frail soul master were evil soul masters. When evil soul masters were influenced by their own evil strength, they would become very self-centered. Naturally, the titled Doluor couldn't bother with the other soul master right now. As he tried to stabilize himself in the air, he quickly unleashed a defensive soul skill, and hid within a layer of thick grayish fog. At the same time, he quickly retreated. The other soul master couldn't adapt at all. As he was critically hurt, he had already fallen from the air by. He was flailing as he tried to circulate his soul power to control his body. However, he couldn't do it in the end. At this moment, he suddenly a chill down his body. This chill didn't come from the temperature of the outside world, it originated from his own senses. As a spiritual type Soul Doluor who was an evil soul master, his senses had always been very acute. When this feeling came, he realized that something was amiss. He desperately screamed, "Save me!" The elder who was rapidly retreating heard his call the moment he exited the radius of the remaining shockwaves of the explosion. After hearing his calls, he was furious. It was because of him that they were caught in the ambush. Aren't you just falling from the sky? Don't tell me you'll fall to death, even though you're a Soul Doluor. Why are you screaming so loud? Even if you're hurt badly, your injuries aren't lethal. The elder had no intention of saving him at all. However, it was also at this moment that he was shocked to find out that the dark sky seemed to have slightly distorted in the space a little ways away from the man in black. Following this, a beam of golden light flashed before it penetrated the head of the frail man in black. The frail man's body was quickly shriveling up as he fell from the sky, and that golden light also revealed its true appearance. It was a long spear that was sharp on both sides. The spear exuded blinding, petrifying golden light. Disastrous. The titled Doluor seemed to have realized something. His figure quickly flashed before he charged straight towards the sky. However, that beam of golden light vanished in the next instant. Following this, there seemed to be a distorted figure that flashed past. In the next moment, everything returned to normal once again. Scoundrel! The titled Doluor shouted furiously, and a huge patch of thick grayish fog pursued that distorted figure. Wherever it passed, blasting sounds resonated through the air. However, his attacks were evidently futile. He could only hit the air. When that frail man in black was killed, he realized that the enemy's target was that frail man in black. The reason was very simple. He was adept at spiritual abilities. From the start until the end, they had not seen the appearance of the enemy. However, without a doubt, this enemy was a spiritual type soul master. Of course, in the eyes of the titled Doluor, the enemy was a spiritual type titled Doluor. To this enemy, this elder wasn't the true threat. This was because he could conceal himself. Even given the elder's cultivation, and even if he unleashed all his senses, he could only discover his enemy within a certain region. On the other hand, that Soul Doluor was different. With him around, it was like having a pair of eyes. It was much easier dealing with the spiritual type titled Doluor. Obviously, the spiritual type titled Doluor wanted to kill the Soul Doluor, because that would greatly reduce their control over him. There were very few spiritual type martial souls in the world of soul masters. There weren't many spiritual type soul masters, even in the Holy Ghost Church. There were more spiritual type evil soul masters compared to ordinary soul masters. However, in just a few years, 3 of them had already died. It was important to know that these evil soul masters were very crucial to the Holy Ghost Church, even though they had very weird temperaments. This rank 87 spiritual type Soul Doluor had now died. How could they possibly catch the enemy now? Indeed, the person who had killed the Soul Doluor was Huo Yuhao. After he charged out from the palace, he found the most appropriate time to use his ice explosion technique, with the help of his spiritual detection. As for turning back to attack, it was originally not in his plan. He had only thought of that idea suddenly. He didn't intend to deal with the frail man initially. After all, it was his first time seeing him and sensing his threat. The reason why Huo Yuhao took action was because he wanted to act when his ice explosion technique was the most effective. He controlled his ice explosion technique with the help of his spiritual detection. Huo Yuhao didn't charge too far out then. He stopped and turned back, and struck just outside the palace walls. The reason why he had returned was because he saw the titled Doluo elder abandoning his partner, leaving him exposed in the air. Huo Yuhao wasn't fit to be called an ultimate soldier if he didn't seize the opportunity. Throwing the golden dragon spear from afar was Wang Qiu's ultimate skill. Huo Yuhao wasn't as strong as her, but he wasn't weak either after fusing with the soul rings she had turned into. Furthermore, he had strengths that she didn't have too. Why did the golden dragon spear appear after the titled Doluo saw a distortion in the dark sky? This was because Huo Yuhao had used his imitation on the golden dragon spear just as he threw it out. This wasn't just a simple use of his spiritual type soul skill. It involved attention to detail. The process was very complex. First, he had to leave a streak of his spiritual sense and spiritual power on the golden dragon spear. He could only do this after his spiritual power materialized. In addition, he was only able to complete such a rapid fusion of his soul and spiritual powers after he had formed his soul core. After this, he imprinted his imitation onto his streak of spiritual power and used it just as he threw the golden dragon spear out. Simply speaking, his imitation was actually unleashed through his golden dragon spear. This was why it was completely concealed in the darkness. It only revealed itself when it arrived in front of the frail man in black. Even when it appeared, it was fully under Huo Yuhao's control. This was because he still had to ensure that his spiritual power continued to move his golden dragon spear and complete the attack. The golden dragon spear thus absorbed the life energy of the frail man. His life energy was directly kept by Huo Yuhao's spiritual power. On the golden dragon spear, it was like an avatar with its own spiritual power and life energy. This avatar controlled the spear to fly back to him as fast as possible. As it flew back, Huo Yuhao's imitation was unleashed again. This allowed the golden dragon spear to move like the wind and instantly conceal itself. This was why Huo Yuhao's attack actually drained a lot of his effort, even though it was just a simple strike. It was only completed through his immense spiritual control. As for the elder, he had discovered Huo Yuhao too late. How was it going to be easy for him to pursue him now? The immense soul power undulations caused by the ice explosion technique didn't only blow apart all the surveillance soul tools in this region of the palace, but it also caused great interference to the aerial surveillance soul tools in the air. It was only possible to locate Huo Yuhao using another spiritual type soul master. Huo Yuhao moved through streets and alleys as he hid in the darkness. He only stopped after he was sure that he was in a safe place. Right now, his breathing was a little quick. However, there was an excited look in his eyes. Ultimate soldier. This was a true ultimate soldier. Sneaking into the enemy's base, killing an influential figure, and fleeing far away. From the start until the end, he wasn't even exposed. The enemy didn't even know who had made such an attack. This feeling was great. From the earlier all-around surveillance in the Heavenly Soul Empire's Imperial Palace, Huo Yuhao had already clearly found out that there was only one spiritual type soul master in the entire palace. It was that guy. Without any soul tools, that guy wasn't able to pose a threat to him. Although spiritual surveillance soul tools could locate him, they still had to be controlled by soul engineers. Compared to soul masters, they weren't very adaptable. Moreover, they couldn't track him. Unless the enemy could use spiritual surveillance soul tools in conjunction with oscillation and thermal detectors, as well as lock onto his position the moment he was detected, there was no way he could be detected, given current soul tool technology. Huo Yuhao had always been monitoring the Sun Moon Empire's soul tool technology throughout this period of war. This was why he was so confident. When he landed in Juzi's trap the last time, it was because he had been too careless. He had underestimated the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion, which caused him to be exposed. But it was a good lesson. At least he wouldn't allow himself to be exposed in the future when it came to similar situations. His direct fighting abilities right now were already very strong. More importantly, he was great at concealing himself. This was actually the most terrifying part about him. The reason why Juzi thought that Huo Yuhao would become her greatest enemy in the future was precisely because of this reason. Huo Yuhao's ability to conceal himself made him much more dangerous than ordinary title Doluo. It was most terrifying when a person's traces couldn't be found. Moreover, given Juzi's understanding of Huo Yuhao, she knew his potential. He possessed an ultimate martial soul, and he already had 7 soul rings. There was no doubt that he would become a title Doluo in the near future. A title Doluo with an ultimate martial soul was even more terrifying than a title Doluo who was an evil soul master. Huo Yuhao entered through the window as usual when he returned to his hotel. He had already calmed down by now. After killing that spiritual type soul Doluo, he had managed to achieve his aim for this mission. However, this would have greatly alarmed the enemy too. During this period of time, the Sun Moon Empire would surely increase their surveillance in the Heavenly Soul Empire's imperial palace. This was inevitable. But could he continue to wait any further? The best way was naturally to wait for them to lower their guard before continuing his surveillance. The enemy might be more relaxed after a period of tension, which would then provide a great opportunity for him. However, Huo Yuhao couldn't wait any further. There were still many things he had to do. He had to quickly gather information from here. Furthermore, through the earlier all-around surveillance, he was certain that neither Ma Xiaodao nor Tang Huaye were in the imperial palace. They were both holy ladies in the Holy Ghost Church, and they were very respected. If they were in Heaven Do City, they would surely be in the imperial palace. Since they weren't, the likelihood that they were in this city was very small. When he thought until here, Huo Yuhao's good mood diminished slightly. Without being able to find Ma Xiaodao and Tang Huaye, it meant that his most important target of this mission wasn't achieved. How could he be happy then? What should I do? Should I try to capture an evil soul master to gather information? Huo Yuhao furrowed his brow. That was the stupidest idea. Perhaps it might be effective, but it wasn't going to be easy. In addition, those evil soul masters might not know where Tang Huaye was. But it seemed like he just had to give it a go. He sat cross-legged and pondered for a moment. After this, he decided that he couldn't think of a better plan. It seemed like capturing an evil soul master and searching his memories was the best he could do. After deciding on this strategy, he had another goal to reach. He thought about it for a moment before he started to perfect his plan. If he wanted to find an evil soul master, the best place to do so was naturally the imperial palace. However, he had just caused a ruckus in the palace. The security in the palace was bound to be very tight now. Under such a circumstance, how could he possibly capture a lone evil soul master? This was a huge problem for him. Furthermore, the evil soul master that he captured couldn't be too weak either. Otherwise, it would be difficult to get any information from him. After formulating a plan, Huo Yuhao slowly entered into meditation and continued to absorb the manifold mysterious ice essence into his body. He felt as if his cultivation was improving by leaps and bounds following every session of meditation, after he started to absorb the manifold mysterious ice essence. His soul power kept on getting stronger, and he was slowly becoming a soul Doluo. If not for the fact that he wasn't ready, he would really like to try out what standard his cultivation had reached. According to his own estimates, he should at least be rank 77 by now. This also meant that his soul power had improved significantly. He had reaped great rewards. The next morning, Huo Yuhao entered his spectral demiplane and fed the 3 bears. After this, he went to the streets again and proceeded in the direction of the imperial palace. As he walked the streets, he paid attention to all the chatter around him. Many people were discussing the explosive boom that came from the palace. It was even rumored that the perimeter of the palace was out of bounds right now. Huo Yuhao kept on walking towards the palace, and only returned after making one round around it. He discovered that the person in charge of Heaven-Do City from the Sun Moon Empire was still very rational. He didn't seal off the entire city, or make it out of bounds, because of what had happened last night. The only area that was out of bounds was the street that he was on yesterday. This was because this street was where a part of the palace walls had blown apart. It was under repair now. Apart from this, everything in the palace appeared to be fine, at least from the outside. He didn't survey the inside of the palace using his spiritual power. He had already unleashed his greatest spiritual power last night. There was no way the enemy wouldn't be wary of him. Any spiritual barriers or similar soul tools would certainly be in use now. If he carried out any spiritual detection, he would be sending himself straight into a trap. Although Huo Yuhao didn't really believe the Sun Moon Empire had any way of finding him, he wasn't going to take the risk. After returning to the hotel, Huo Yuhao called the Ice Bear King out from his spectral demiplane. Given his individual abilities, he wasn't really very impressive in Heaven-Do City. However, it was different if he had Little Bai's help. Furthermore, he had some other plans. "Grandpa, what kind of place is that?" "It's really fun. Those skeletons are really interesting. But why are they running away from me?" Little Bai asked excitedly. Huo Yuhao hadn't set any boundaries for him in the demiplane. He had allowed him to bring Big Mao and Second Mao out to play. When Electrolux created this demiplane, he had made it so that the specters in the demiplane could evolve. Even Huo Yuhao didn't know where they got their energy from. According to the memories that Electrolux left behind, it should have its origins in spatial strength. As for how Electrolux managed to do that, he had no clue at all. It seemed to be a strength from another world. Unless his cultivation could reach that of Electrolux, there was no way he could possibly find any clues. Huo Yuhao said, "This is a demiplane that one of my teachers left behind for me. It's a parallel dimension of our world, and only I can open it. Since you like it here, I'll let you enter a few more times in the future. However, we've things to do now. You must follow my plan." Huo Yuhao recounted his plan to the Ice Bear King. He knew that the Ice Bear King was rather simple-minded, and wouldn't be able to remember a plan that was too complex. This was why he tried to simplify the mission that he gave the Ice Bear King. As for the complicated stuff, he left it for himself. After settling the plan, Huo Yuhao and Ice Bear King remained in the hotel to rest. 2 days later. The streets of Heaven-Do City were still very crowded. It was already evening now, and the sky had just turned dark. This was the time when business was booming for hotels and restaurants. Apart from those who were going home, there were a lot of people who were proceeding towards restaurants and eating places. Huo Yuhao slowly walked among the crowd. After 2 days of observation, the situation in the palace had already quieted down. The damaged palace walls had already been repaired. As for what was going on in the palace, he didn't manage to find out anything through his spiritual detection. Today was the day he was going to truly take action. The imperial palace was already within sight from afar. Huo Yuhao naturally walked towards it. After this, he sat in a small restaurant not far from the palace. He ordered some dishes and sat there alone, eating by himself. It was at this moment that a figure silently came to the outside of the palace walls. The light around his body was distorted. It was as if this figure had completely assimilated with the air. It was just that streaks of air could be seen slightly distorting under the dim night lights. If he revealed his figure right now, everyone who had ever seen him would be shocked. This was because he was also Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao slowly walked with his toes on the ground. He leaped up and arrived above the palace walls. He silently unleashed his spiritual detection towards the inside of the palace. Indeed, just like he had expected, the defensive installations in the palace weren't any different from before. After all, it was quite unrealistic to install more oscillation and thermal detectors. The palace was so huge. How could they possibly find so many more spiritual surveillance soul tools in such a short period of time? Huo Yuhao found a spot that the oscillation detectors didn't cover, exploiting it to sneak into the palace. He quickly moved into the depths of the palace. The number of patrolling guards hadn't been increased either. Perhaps the Sun Moon Empire thought that ordinary soldiers didn't have any effect on titled Doluo. Huo Yuhao went going deeper and deeper into the palace. Everything seemed to be business as usual. His spiritual detection was controlled within 100 meters from him. He didn't carry out any detection on a large scale. He only stopped when he was around 500 meters from the center of the palace, where he silently hid in a dark corner. It was also at this moment that the air started to undulate a little. Following this, snow started to fall from the sky. At the start, it was only a few snowflakes, but slowly, the wind became stronger and stronger. More and more snowflakes started to fall. Patches of snowflakes were being blown about by the raging winds. In just a short period of time, the entire palace was covered in a blizzard. It was weird, but this blizzard only engulfed the inside of the palace. It didn't leak out to any other parts of the Heavenly Soul Empire. At this moment, the people who were passing by not far from the palace were shocked. It was their first time seeing the palace being engulfed by a blizzard. Such a phenomenon would only occur in the extreme north. Although Heaven-Do City was quite close to the north, and it would also snow in the winter, it was impossible for there to be a blizzard. This blizzard was very strong. When the snowflakes scratched the structures in the palace, piercing scratching sounds could be heard. The inside of the palace was a mess right now. Many of the patrolling guards were hurt by the blizzard. Furthermore, the temperature in the palace was also falling dramatically. From the original 10 degrees Celsius, the temperature soon fell to negative 20 degrees Celsius. The confusion and mess in the palace worsened due to this extremely cold temperature. Shadows dashed out continuously from the structures inside the royal palace. There were soul masters and soul engineers, but they couldn't do anything even if they were outside. How were they to face such a sinister change in the weather? Several intelligent soul engineers immediately realized that the problem was probably in the sky. Everyone flew separately into the air to investigate. However, they quickly ran into trouble once they actually went up into the sky. The further they went, the stronger the blizzard was, and fierce gales blew as their flying-type soul tools couldn't support them any further. Many soul engineers were directly blown back down, and they fell to their certain and miserable deaths. 3 elderly men appeared on a relatively tall roof inside the royal palace at the same time. One of them was the evil titled Doluo that he had seen before. The 2 other elderly men seemed a lot more normal, and 9 soul rings flickered on each of their bodies. These were 3 titled Doluo. Huo Yuhao was still hidden within a dark and shadowy corner, but he could observe everything that was happening around him with spiritual detection. There was no doubt that this blizzard came from the Ice Bear King, and his execution was very similar to how it was back in the extreme north. The Ice Bear King quietly left Heaven-Do City before he followed Huo Yuhao's instructions, as he took to the skies from a place where the surveillance soul tools above Heaven-Do City couldn't reach. He went more than 4,000 meters above into the sky, far higher than the aerial surveillance soul tools could reach, before he flew above the royal palace, and through this blizzard towards the ground. This was the strength of top-tier individuals. The Ice Bear King wasn't yet like an ultimate Doluo, but his strength was comparable to that of a rank 96, or rank 97 transcendent Doluo. Furthermore, even though his control over ice and snow wasn't at the level of the Ice Empress and the Snow Empress, who could control ultimate ice, it was sufficient for his blizzard to reach 100 degrees below zero. That was a very frightening number. The blizzard's strength became a lot weaker as it came down from the sky, but it could still reach 30 to 40 degrees below zero. That was an enormous threat to normal people. What's going on, Hall Master Jing? An evil soul master lowered his voice and asked. The person standing in the middle of the 3 elderly men was, surprisingly, someone who Huo Yuhao was very familiar with, Jing Hongchen, the illustrious Virtue Hall's Hallmaster. Yes, Jing Hongchen wasn't in the illustrious Virtue Hall during the tremendous explosion in Radiant City. He wasn't the only one that wasn't there. His 2 grandchildren weren't there either. They were heavily injured during the grand competition, so they were receiving treatment from the royal palace's imperial physician. Jing Hongchen was protecting them by their side, and he was looking over his grandchildren. It was because of that they managed to avoid the disaster. Still, the great explosion had dealt a heavy blow to Jing Hongchen. The illustrious virtue Huo was completely ruined, and his entire life's worth of blood and sweat was buried beneath rubble just like that. In addition to his grandchildren being heavily injured, he fell extremely sick because of these blows, and even his cultivation took a hit. Following Xiao Hongchen's gradual recovery, and in addition to the fact that Xu Qianran still relied heavily on him after ascending to the throne, his emotions were slowly able to recover. Jing Hongchen remained here as leader of Heaven Do City, after they conquered the Heavenly Soul Empire's capital. Heaven Do City was considered one of the most popular large cities in the Doluo continent. Furthermore, it was positioned in the Heavenly Soul Empire's central and northern region that was lying towards the west. They could use this place as a stronghold, and this was thus a very important transition stop for storing food and transporting soldiers. This place held very important strategic importance for the Sun Moon Empire's invasion against the continent. Xu Qianran personally gave the order for Jing Hongchen to hold down the fort here, which also displayed that Xu Qianran had sufficient trust in him. The war was started a little hastily. That was the reason why the Sun Moon Empire's illustrious virtue Huo was still being reconstructed. The Sun Moon Empire had to bear a great burden by starting this war, and even though they had gained the upper hand under Juzi's appropriate battle strategies, their supply lines had been stretched longer and longer with the passage of time. They needed soldiers to stand guard over the territories that they had conquered from the Heavenly Soul Empire, while they had to fight back against the Heavenly Soul Empire's scattered attacks in their conquered territories, as well as against the reclusive sects, who were hidden away in the dark. They expended a lot of resources and men every day, and that was the reason why the Sun Moon Empire had channeled and mobilized as much resources and power they could into this war. Jing Hongchen was a Class 9 soul engineer who was loyal to Xu Qianran, and he was naturally given an important responsibility. However, the Holy Ghost Church was starting to become increasingly outrageous within the Sun Moon Empire. Their supreme leader had requested that a soul master from the Holy Ghost Church to take a position of vice-city leader in any large city that the Sun Moon Empire had conquered. The Sun Moon Empire's senior commanders expressed their strict opposition to that request at first. However, the Holy Ghost Church was just too powerful, especially because they had two ultimate Doluo. They were very useful for the Sun Moon Empire's invasion, so Xu Qianran had no choice but to accommodate their demands. He knew that the Holy Ghost Church was a little too large for efficient organization, but he had no choice, because he wanted to expand his territory. The strategy that Xu Qianran had in his heart was actually very simple. He wanted to continue using the Holy Ghost Church to expand the Sun Moon Empire's territory, and with the passage of war, the Holy Ghost Church's strength would undoubtedly be expended continuously. The Holy Ghost Church was an organization of evil soul masters. Evil soul masters were indeed powerful, but at the same time, powerful evil soul masters had their own problems, the problem of replenishing their numbers. The Holy Ghost Church only attained the scale that they were at today after accumulating their strength for thousands of years in the darkness. This wasn't done within 1 or 2 days. Once they had sustained too many deaths and losses, their overall strength would be continuously weakened. As the Sun Moon Empire dominated more territory, their national strength only became stronger, while the Sun Moon Empire's royal family would have more soul masters and soul engineers to command. When the time came, the Sun Moon Empire would become increasingly stronger, while the Holy Ghost Church would become continuously weaker, and Xu Qianran wouldn't be afraid that the Holy Ghost Church would turn against them. Furthermore, the two ultimate Doluo were powerful, but they were already more than 200 years old. They were very near the human limits, and who knew when these two would just pass away from old age. What Xu Qianran was truly afraid of were these two ultimate Doluo. The result of Xu Qianran accommodating the Holy Ghost Church in Heaven Do City was another titled Doluo from the Holy Ghost Church here together with Jing Hongchen. This elder's title was Nightmare, and he was rare soul master who was adept with illusions. His martial soul was the Nightmare Demon, a soul beast that had very poor fighting skills, but extremely powerful illusory powers. That was the reason why his martial soul was very rare. The Nightmare Doluo hadn't unleashed his true powers when Huo Yuhao faced him that day. Both soul masters and normal citizens would enter a dreamlike state when struck by his illusory attacks. If that happened, then the nightmare Doluo could kill that individual, and he could even control them in battle. The final result was that the person who was put into a nightmare would die regardless, while all that resentment and fear after death was most beneficial for the nightmare Doluo's cultivation. The nightmare Doluo once sent an entire village into a nightmare due to some private benefit a long time ago, and he became a public enemy. He was chased down by many soul masters, but his illusions were far too powerful, and he finally broke out while killing many of the soul masters who were chasing him. He all but disappeared in the end, and vanished off the grid. He was then recruited by the Holy Ghost Church. The nightmare Doluo wasn't much of a threat to top-tier soul masters. Illusions were hardly effective against transcendent Doluo, but if his nightmares were used against normal citizens or soldiers, then the destruction that he could cause could even surpass that of a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell. Therefore, his status in the Holy Ghost Church was relatively high, and he was one of the few who were consecrated by the Holy Ghost. His status was even above an elder. Back when the Sun Moon Empire was attacking Heaven Do City, the nightmare Doluo had used his formidable illusions to confuse many soldiers on the city wall. He made them attack and murder each other, which created an incredible opportunity for the Sun Moon Empire, and he had remained after the city was broken. The nightmare Doluo today didn't kill as much as he did back then. At his level, normal citizens and even low-tier soul masters and their resentment inside a nightmare were no longer enough to aid his cultivation. He needed soul masters at a certain standard so that he could improve. More accurately put, the more powerful a soul master's spiritual power, the stronger the resentment after dying under his nightmares. That kind of resentment was the most beneficial for him. Speak, Huo Master Jing. The nightmare Doluo's face darkened as he pushed Jing Hongchen to speak. Jing Hongchen frowned and said, I can only conclude that this isn't something created by soul tools. This should be a soul master's ability, and this person has to be a transcendent Doluo to bring such an enormous blizzard down upon us. I'll take a look up in the sky. I'll leave this place to the two of you. Wait, the nightmare Doluo hurriedly stopped Jing Hongchen. Huo Master Jing, if you discover that title Doluo with formidable spiritual power, you have to notify me. We will try our best to capture him, and as long as we capture him, I'll do anything for you if you need me in the future. Jing Hongchen glanced at him and nodded. All right. With that, he flew high into the sky. The powerful winds in the blizzard weren't enough to block him, as he was a Class 9 soul engineer, and they could only reduce his speed. The nightmare Doluo was furious after Huo Yuhao had escaped the other day, but he couldn't find any traces of him at all. However, he had felt very excited after that day. Huo Yuhao was a spiritual type soul master, and if he perished under his nightmares, then that soul master's resentment would be extremely beneficial for him. From his perspective, Huo Yuhao should be a spiritual type title Doluo. He was very clear that his nightmares and illusory abilities were insufficient to directly kill a spiritual type title Doluo. However, he would have a much higher chance of success after severely injuring that person, while the resentment produced after killing them would be the same. This person's death could even help his soul power, which had been stagnant for a long time, improve once more. This video will end here.